Hi, it's the Red, White, and Blue Jew, aka Jake Donnelly. Normally, I would say good morning, Boker Tov, but it is not a good morning because the country is trying to tear itself apart over a law enforcement shooting in Minnesota where an ICE official shot a woman in a car. And I know a lot of the people who are blaming the law enforcement officer and saying that he murdered that woman are the type of people who love to talk about lived experience. So let me tell you a little bit about my family, because my family has that lived experience. My older brother has that exact lived experience as a police officer, but he didn't shoot. So let me tell you what it's like when a police officer in that exact position does not shoot. It's a life of pain. It's a life that is ruined by somebody else's decision. Late at night, more than a decade ago, my brother was standing in front of a car as, just like you saw in Minnesota, they were trying to box somebody in. And my brother saw a shadow in the back of that car, and he thought that shadow could be a child. And the driver of that car forced a decision upon my older brother. He said, "Your life or mine." And my brother said, "I'm going to sacrifice my life for the child that I think is in the back of that car." Turns out there was no child. But what there was a car, a deadly weapon that hit my brother, smashed him up onto the hood like you see in the movies, drove with him on the hood like you see in the movies, and then threw him from the car like you see in the movies. But unlike television and unlike the movies, he didn't just get up, roll, and was perfectly fine afterwards. Since that moment, my brother has been in nonstop pain, nonstop torture, because of the decision that driver made, just like the decision that driver in Minnesota made yesterday. But my brother couldn't dance at my wedding. Instead, he had a cane. My brother couldn't dance with his wife, whom he loves, because of that driver who forced that decision. He won't be able to dance at his daughter's wedding. His daughter, who is also, by the way, a police officer, and that's because of the decision that driver made more than a decade ago. Numerous spinal fusion surgeries, a dislocated leg that nobody saw because the rest of his body was so messed up from that. So for everybody saying, "Oh no, the law enforcement officer, even though he was hit by that car, oh, the law enforcement officer, he had time." No, he didn't. That woman, by the way, was in no way unarmed. She was behind the wheel of a car. And a vehicle is a weapon. The people of Nice, France, know that vehicles are weapons. The people of Waukesha, Wisconsin, they know that vehicles are weapons. And that weapon was pointed at the law enforcement officer yesterday, and that woman forced a decision upon that law enforcement officer. She said, "Your life or mine." And in a moment, he chose, and he chose correctly. My brother sacrificed his life for a child that he did not know was there or not. And since that moment, he's been in constant pain. I wish every single day that my brother, the toughest person I know alive, made a different decision so he could have lived a better life, so that his life was not ruined by the selfish decision of that driver. And it was selfish. And the decision yesterday by that woman was selfish. She decided that she knows better, that she's not going to follow the law, that in fact, she's going to become the law enforcement officer and start doing traffic control. No, you don't get to do that. The Western civilization, the United States of America, is predicated, founded on the rule of law and following laws that say, very simply put, actions have consequences. Here are good actions that you're allowed to do, and here are bad actions that you're not allowed to do. And if you do the bad actions, bad things, consequences, repercussions occur to you. And that, unfortunately, is tragically what happened yesterday in Minnesota. But that wasn't a decision by the law enforcement officer. That woman behind the car forced the decision upon him, a selfish decision that made him have to decide my life or hers. And he chose, thankfully, his life. such a selfish decision that she made her child an orphan. That's what she did yesterday. She decided that the rules do not apply to her. They do. They apply to everybody. That's why I love being Jewish. Being Jewish and following Jewish tradition, one of the most important things is establishing courts of law, because society collapses if we don't have rules, if we don't have laws. And people die when you don't follow rules, when you don't follow the laws. She didn't. She decided, I'm not going to follow that rule. At a time when ICE officers are literally being hunted and attacked wherever they go, she decided, I am going to do whatever I want in front of this ICE officer, who we are finding out was hit and suffered stitches and injury several months ago. So he knew what happens when you do get hit by a car. And this time he made the right decision. The decision that allows him to go home to his family and to not be in the type of pain that my older brother is in constantly. A life of torture that somebody else forced him into. That is what happens. And as tragic and as horrific as yesterday was, it would be an even bigger tragedy if the person dead was the law enforcement officer. And that's just reality. That's a lived experience. So before you go and talk about how the law enforcement officer had time even though he was hit, how the law enforcement officer shot through the window even though he shot through the windshield in front of the car, before you go and do all of that, think of the inverse. Think of the law enforcement officers like my older brother, who are lucky enough to live a life of torture and pain because they lived. There are other police officers and law enforcement officers who cannot, because they either didn't react in time or because they decided, I'm not going to shoot. And because of that, they are dead. They were murdered. Yesterday in Minnesota, that wasn't a murder. That was a tragedy. But it was a decision and a happenstance that could have been avoided. But somebody made a selfish decision and forced it upon a law enforcement officer and said, your life or mine. And today that law enforcement officer is alive because he chose his own life when that woman was forced to say, you know what? I'm going to take the law into my own hands. She wasn't forced into it. She said, I'm going to take the law into my own hands. And that's what happens. Actions have consequences. And you can live a life that is perfect. But if you make one terrible mistake, your life can end just like that. It's a tragedy. I have no other words. This is the Red, White, and Blue Jew, aka Jake Donnelly, saying until next time, folks. See ya. And please do better and start living life as if actions have consequences.